Today marks the 10-year anniversary of the release of Dear Esther. Well, actually it was yesterday, but I only just realized it yesterday, so I'm behind the time as usual. But being that it was such a polarizing game that is considered the very first in the walking simulator genre, I figured there was no better time than the 10-year anniversary to say why this is a classic that is truly underrated. And if you haven't played Dear Esther for yourself, I strongly encourage it, so feel free to pause this video and come on back here once you've experienced it for yourself. Now, those who've played Dear Esther typically fall into one or two camps. Either they consider it to be groundbreaking, beautiful, and introspective, or they consider it to be boring, pretentious, and utterly confusing. And I don't disagree with either of those interpretations because that's one of the beauties of Dear Esther. There is much left up to interpretation. It is the story of a man who has traveled to a Hebridean island off the coast of Scotland, either literally or figuratively, to mourn the loss of his dear Esther, who passed away in a car crash they suffered together some time before. It is a walking simulator in its purest form, being that there's nothing to be interacted with or picked up to be stowed away. You simply walk while listening to the increasingly chaotic and fever-driven ramblings of a man reading unsent letters to his deceased wife as he's about to succumb to his own infection. And the meaning that you take away from this largely depends on whether you approach his pilgrimage as a literal one or one that takes place in his own mind. Has he truly traveled to a derelict island to throw himself off the radio tower? Is he on his deathbed watching the lights of the life support machines flicker in an empty room? Is he already dead and stuck between worlds as he's forced to relive the trauma and grief of losing his wife while reconciling his guilt and pain as he takes flight again and again? Or is it something else entirely? The game is played in first person and the story is told in snippets as you encounter various trigger points around the island. You cannot run, there are no puzzles, there's nothing to kill, you can't manipulate anything, heck, you can't even control the outcome. Therefore, it is often considered not a game, or if they really want to stick it to those high and mighty hipsters who sing Dear Esther's praises, it's a shit game. The last of which is an unfair assessment stemming from the player's preconceived idea on what a game should be. But I will concede that this is more of an interactive poem or an experience, as I like to call it, but not understanding what something is doesn't make it shit, it just makes it not for you. And while I won't argue what's a game versus what's not, I will say that there is a challenge to Dear Esther, and that's understanding what is actually happening. The first time I played through the game, I was so awestruck by the visuals and cadence of Nigel Carrington's voice, as he, in a poetic and oftentimes convoluted manner, brought to life the musings of the narrator's feverish mind. The music was also a thing of beauty, and I don't think most people can say anything negative about Jessica Curry's musical score. She's also the same person who composed the music of Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, as well as Amnesia, Machine for Pigs, and her compositions will give you all the feels. But with these elements in place, I was initially left more with a feeling than an understanding. I felt forlorn and confused and a bit of emptiness that the experience was over. Not in a bad way, but in a way that you feel when your favorite series is over and you're left in that, show hole. Yeah, that. It was only afterwards that I learned that both the visuals and the narrative are randomized, so everyone's experience was different. There were so many of us in the message boards frantically trying to fit together the puzzle pieces of this heartbreaking narrative, and I learned that there was so much that I did not know. So this prompted me to jump back in and take that walk around the island again, this time really listening and seeking to understand what the game was saying. I've taken so many laps now. We all have our own interpretation of how Jacobson and Donnelly and the biblical undertones and the chaotic chemical symbols and even the island itself fit into the greater narrative. And I won't delude myself into believing that I can do an interpretation the justice that it deserves, at least not in the brief time frame I have before this 10-year anniversary recognition is over. But there is an absolutely phenomenal video by Pixel a Day that I will link in the description that summarizes the game in the most profound way. And perhaps if there is new life breathed into this old classic, this will be something for me to circle back to in the future. But that's up to you in the comments section. Until then, here is a video of another walking sim with more gameplay mechanics to sink your gaming teeth into.